Alright, you lot. So, not really doing anything specific here. I'm literally just going to start up me Nova B3 just because I ain't been run for a while, and I like to start engines quite regularly if they're not being used even, because it's no good for them to sit around. So I just sort of start them up now and again. And I ain't used that. I ain't got no radio gear for it. So until I get radio gear, I won't be using it. But I thought we could have a little chat about engines, because there seems to be some misconceptions and some myths and some just random stuff going around, I've noticed, which is just, I don't know, I thought we could have a little conversation about it, work it all out. Somebody stuck a comment on one of my videos saying that they was running their engine in cold weather, and it was the cold weather that made it seize up. Well, listen, that is not what made it seize up. What this person had is what's called a cold seize. Now, they said it's because the head made the engine stay too cool, which, don't get me wrong, in certain conditions, depending how cold it is, your engine can get too cold. I mean, for example, in Alaska and all the other really cold countries, some parts of Canada that get really cold, they actually put sheets. They probably got a name, but I don't know what they're called. But I know they put like sheets over the grills of their actual pickup trucks and lorries and cars, and that stops the airflow going into the radiator. Because if the air goes into the radiator as it's moving along, it will get too cold, the car will never warm up, and if an engine runs too cold, it's not good for it to run too cold, because it needs to be hot in order to stop the wear and the tear, and just stop any unnecessary wear, basically, as I said. So there is certain circumstances where it would be too cold to run a nitro engine, because, well, you could run a nitro engine in cold conditions, as a matter of fact, but what you would have to do is you'd have to get something like your engine heater, for example, but you would obviously wouldn't have an engine heater because you wouldn't have all the wire on it, but perhaps you could have an old one and cut the wire off, or you could just make your own little thing there, and you just have something over the engine just to keep the heat in. You don't want to keep too much heat in, but you want to keep some in. But we're talking massively, we're talking stupidly cold. So maybe you lot in Canada and all the other countries in the winter, maybe you lot practice something like what I just suggested. But me personally, I wouldn't bother doing any of that. The RPMs, what these bastards get up to when they're actually running, I don't think that it'll get cold, to be honest. I reckon this will stay more than hot enough. So the importance comes with warming up the engine before you start it. I mean, really, you only have to warm up a race engine before you start it in any condition. The ready-to-run engines and other ones like that, you don't really have to warm up, like that one, for example. You don't really need to warm it up in normal conditions, but when it gets down to winter and you're talking sort of 0 degrees and below 0 degrees Celsius, you need to start heating this up before you start it, because not only will it not start, but also it will cause some damage when it does start, because the RPMs, even on tick over, are massive, and it'll cause extra wear and tear, which you just don't want. So it is quite important to warm it up first. But what I really want to talk about is a cold seize. Nobody seems to know what a cold seize is, which I find absolutely astonishing. Nobody knows what a cold seize is. So a cold seize is when you've got, and I can get a good example actually, if you just bear with me in a minute. You've got your engine, but it's cold. You start it up, and the piston's going up and down, causing a lot of friction and a lot of heat. So it all expands as it gets hot. Now, this is why you should never ever rev a cold engine, and I think the people who do are idiots. And even these people who say this is what you do with an aeroplane, I know they're designed to rev up from start up, alright, but I still think it's a bit stupid. They should make them so they tick over for a little while. It's like generators and stuff, without a throttle, like a modern generator these days, they go straight to full whack, I do think it's stupid. The amount of generators I've seen that have got catastrophic failure, I reckon if they had them so they started up on tick over low RPMs for even 30 seconds, just to get some oil pumping around and some heat in it, there'd be a lot less catastrophic failures. But we're going off topic now. I don't want to keep going off topic. Let me go and get a piston and a liner, and I'll show you an example of what happens with the cold seize. Now, this doesn't just happen with nitro engines. It'll happen with any internal combustion engine, even the wankery engines, the wankle engines, yeah, rotary engines. They're susceptible to it as well, but in a different way. In fact, it's even more imperative you have to warm them up, because they've got endless bloody seals and all sorts in them. They're a nightmare, them engines. I mean, them things are, well, yeah, they're good when they run, them rotary engines, the wankle engine. They're normally RX-7s and RX-8s, and probably some other engines, other cars that I just don't know about. But anyway, let's talk about conventional piston engines. So this is a piston and a liner, right? The piston goes inside the liner. Some engines, as I already said, don't have liners. They've just got a block with cylinders. But we're talking about nitro because this is the nitro channel. So we'll talk about a nitro engine. So the piston goes inside the liner, hopefully in focus, right? And then obviously that goes up like that. And then the fuel and air goes in, bang, and the force of the explosion pushes the piston down, right, and then the crank, and then it goes back up again. So this is going up and down there, monumental RPMs, absolutely ridiculous RPMs. If you could see this block was see-through, this piston would be invisible, right? Even at tick over, it would be nearly impossible to see it. It's just a blur. So, if you can imagine, this piston's going up and down, right? As it's heating up quick, and the piston expands, but so does the liner, right? The liner expands, the block itself expands, right? The block, this will expand ever so slightly. We're talking minute tolerances here, but it will expand because everything heats up, and when things heat up, they expand. So a cold seize is when you rev an engine up before it's warmed up, and the piston expands quicker than the cylinder, or the liner in this case. And obviously if the piston's bigger than the bore, it's going to get jammed in there, and that is a cold seize. This is why it's imperative to warm an engine up before you rev it. You know, even such things as chainsaws, right? Chainsaws, hedge trimmers, these usually suffer because people never warm them up. I had some dickhead try to tell me that you don't warm a chainsaw up. Absolute knob. You warm any engine up. Chainsaws just as so, and trimmers, because they're an engine, right? And the way you use a chainsaw is you have it flat out because you want to cut a tree, right? So it's flat out revs under a heavy load. If you start it up and then just go flat out, it's cold, man. That's why chainsaws are often, if you buy an old chainsaw, you need to be very careful with it if you buy a second-hand chainsaw, because usually they will be knackered. If you get someone that's looked after it and warmed it up before they use it and cooled it down after they've used it, you'll be alright. Let's go on talk about nitros again, shall we? Also, with engines, nitros, I know some of you lot, I'm not one of them. I should do, and I know you're all going to give me a slap round the face for it, but I don't do it, but I should do. And this is where I preach. I'm a bit of a hypocrite. I'm going to preach here, but I don't do it. I'll tell you, you'll work out what that is in a minute. But what I do is cool down before I turn them off. Now, we just talked about a cold seize, right? When the piston expands quicker than the bore does, and the piston gets jammed. That's usually temporary, and as the engine cools down, it'll become loose again, and it will probably run reasonably well, but depends if it did any damage when it got jammed in that cylinder. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is, we've talked about warmed up. We need to cool down the engines before we turn them off, after we've used them. Now, if you can imagine, this is less likely to happen, but it can happen, and I've had it happen. Well, I haven't personally had it happen, but I've had engines on things that this has happened to. And specifically nitros as well, they're very susceptible to this. You need to be careful. So let's just say you've been flat out, right? You've been going around a track, maybe you're racing, or maybe you've just been going up and down the road. Yeah, or around a car park. You put it up to where you are, and you go, oh, well, good. Whoa, turn it off. There's going to be so much heat inside that engine. This piston is going to be roasting. The liner is going to be roasting. The bearings, everything is going to be hot, man. Now, that's now stopped. The piston is in one place in the liner, right? It's just there. Now, put it this way. You imagine what this is like. You know, if you're eating your dinner and you get a really hot piece of food, you put it in your mouth and it starts to burn your tongue. You can't chew it. You start going... You want to move it around your mouth, don't you? To stop it burning your tongue. Then it burns your cheek and and then you think, I'm going to swallow it. And you swallow it and it gets there. And it starts to burn in your chest as it goes down. It's the same for an engine, right? There's monumental amount of heat in there. Now it's stopped. It's just sitting there, right? Every component in that engine is just sitting there. And I know some of you like to turn the old flywheel so it brings the piston down from TDC after you stop the engine. But even then, so you've got a roasting hot engine, you've just stopped it and then you've gone, I put it down there. Now the piston, it's not at the pinch, so you know, I know you want to save your pinch because you lot are obsessed with bloody pinch, that's all you lot go on about. But now your piston's down there and it's roasting away inside that sleeve. Now this can cause damage. It's unlikely that it will seize up, very unlikely to seize up, but it can cause damage, yeah, because it's just sitting there roasting. You can get hot spots and all sorts of damage can occur when you do this. This is for every internal combustion engine, your real size car, your motorbike, your chainsaw, your strimmer, your nitro car, everything needs to be cooled down. And by that I mean, you're flat out, yeah? Go around a car park, you pull it up to your feet, just let it tick over, just let it sit there, let it tick over, yeah? Let the heat dissipate, just let it chill out. Tick over for 30 seconds to a minute. I mean, generally, I know in videos you don't see it because I'm filming a video and so it's just whatever. But general practice, I usually let it tick over. You know, the car's sitting there ticking over while I'm putting my bag in the boot and putting everything away in the car. The last thing that I put in the car is the car. I turn it off. It's cooled down. Yeah. Down to you'll be amazed the amount of heat what comes off of it on tick over. Yeah, it'll be roasting when you're using it, but when you let it tick over, the heat will just go straight down. And then when you turn it off, I know you're going to say, well, the piston's still going to be hot. Of course it is, but it's not going to be nowhere near as hot as it was when it was being driven around. And we'll quickly touch on the fact of real cars with turbos, right? Your actual car with a turbo on it. If you turn that off straight away, you are an absolute cock. Because turning a turboed engine off straight away is, well, you're asking for catastrophic failure. You need to let that tick over, you need to let that cool down. But that's a different topic. We're on about nitro, so we'll stay. I know I've gone on about chainsaws, but we'll stay with the nitro thing. So I just wanted to touch on that. There's been a few comments flying around about people that reckon their engines have seized up and all that because, you know, the condition's too cold. It ain't too cold. Warm your engine up before you start it, yeah. And then even if you use an engine heater, you warm your engine up with the engine heater and then you start it up, doesn't matter, right? It does not matter. Still let it tick over, still get plenty of heat in there before you rev it. The amount of people I've seen start their cars up on the starter box, start them up, and then within about 2 or 3 seconds, bollocks, you know. Some people are like, well, it's a race buggy, I don't care, I'm just going to rebuild the engine tomorrow. Fair enough. But, you know, I still think it's stupid. You need to look after your engines, man. Look after everything. These things, you know, even if you are going to use, I can just go and get a new piston and liner tomorrow from the shop. What a waste of money. More money than sense. But anyway, there we go. I thought I'd just have a little conversation about that because, you know me, I like to give some information to you lot. Some of you might not know, you know. You might be like, bloody hell, all this time I've been mistreating my car. It's my pride and joy, but I've been mistreating it. Now you know how to treat it properly. Warm it up and cool it down. Otherwise you might get some damage happened. If you didn't understand anything in this video and I confused you, or if you just want to know some more facts or anything like that, just put it in the comments and I'll tell you anything you want to know, man. It's you know, and if I don't know the answer, there will be someone out there that will read the comments and they will know the answer. But you have got to be careful you don't fall in the trap of listening to all the crap out there, and you know, well, you know what I'm trying to say. Thanks for being there. Thanks for sticking around. You know, treat everybody equally, and we'll all have a happy life. Ciao for now, you lot.